Welcome to one more installment of the Learning Curve webinar, which, as you all know, is a monthly affair on the first Wednesday of every month. The last issue was working with worksheets, because you see, we all found that worksheets in the pandemic were so popular and they became such a great way of learning, teaching, as well as assessing that we thought we must devote an entire issue to worksheets. Today we have with us three writers of three excellent articles in this issue number 12, and we have with us Chandrika. Let me introduce, it's my duty and pleasure to introduce each of you. First we have Pooja Vishnoi, who completed her MA from the Azim Premji University and joined the foundation at Barmer, prior to which she taught in a government school for a year. Her area of interest lies in understanding how second language can be taught and learned with the help of the first language. Then we have Vita Pandey, who has a postgraduate degree in education from the Azim Premji University. She has been facilitating learning spaces for children in both formal as well as informal capacities for the last 7 years. Now, currently, she's a primary years facilitator at the AIMEE International School in Vijayawada, where she actively explores the scope of inquiry in maths education. Then we have with us Vaishnavi B, who is a practitioner in the field of education, currently working as an English resource person, the foundation in Bangalore itself. She has an MA in education from the University, and her interests are in exploring children's literature, language pedagogy, and community engagement. The person they are going to be in conversation with needs no introduction really to those of us who are in the university and foundation. But for those who don't know, who are newcomers, it's my pleasure to introduce Chandrika Muralidhar, who is a faculty member in the School of Continuing Education and the University Resource Center, Azim Premji University. She also teaches and contributes to professional development programs. She has been working in the space of science education, teacher capacity enhancement, curricular material development, textbook writing, and is an editorial member of the Azim Premji University's publications. Welcome to all of you. And now we are in for an hour's terrific discussion on our three guests who are going to be interviewed and in conversation with Chandrika Muralidhar. Great. Come on, over to you, Chandrika.
Thank you so much, Prema. A very warm welcome to all those who have joined us on this webinar. A very warm welcome to our three guests and our authors of the articles on worksheets. I'm having been a practitioner for 30 years. Uh, there are there are a couple of things that fascinate me about other practitioners. One thing is that the way in which they approach uh, the, their, their pedagogy in their classrooms, the way in which they adapt based on the kind of concept that needs to be taught, uh, and the way in which they, kind of connect with their learners. It's always fascinated me. That is one thing that always fascinates me. And the second thing is that the way in which practitioners other than me, use learning materials, because everybody has their own style of using everybody has their own style of pedagogy. Everybody has their own style of using the materials and the kinds of materials, choosing the kinds of materials. And all of us know that over a period of time, you always have materials which they evolve. they change, they evolve, or we scrap the materials and so on. And so it's a very progressive kind of a journey of material creation. But as Prema said, in the last couple of years, one particular set of material which has been used extensively by teachers, students, and parents have also been involved, are the worksheets. And we had a separate, our theme of the learning curve this time was worksheets. And so, so in this webinar, we are going to speak about working with worksheets in the classroom. And Pooja and Vaishnavi, as Prema said, they work in the field of language education, specifically English, and Richa works in the field of math, right? So, so it'll be really interesting to know the kinds of experiences that you have had, which you have shared in your articles. But it would be good to hear from you personally, right? So, so this is how we'll structure our discussion. I'll just ask you one or maybe two questions, which all three of you can answer, and then we will go into the specifics of each of your articles and have a few questions with each of you. Hmm? Shall we begin, ladies? Pooja, Richa, and Vaishnavi. Shall we? All right,
Yes, ma'am.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Uh, so my first question to you would be that uh, how do worksheets create an interest in learners? Based on what you people have written and what you've experienced, uh, what according to you is you know needed to create an interest, or what does a worksheet do to a particular learner? Any of you can go first. I'll just.
Uh, I'll go. Hi, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here today. Everybody present in this webinar is either working in education or is interested in education field and has worked with children. So, whoever has interacted with a class full of children knows that every class has a lot of diversity in it, and in the diversity there's not only diversity of nature among children, like some children would be shy, some would be very notorious, some would not sit quietly and listen to you, and with this they have varied interest levels also. So something would interest one and something would not interest the other child. And with that also, when learning levels come into the play, it adds one more extra layer of complexity. Um so, if we see at a diverse classroom, uh, we understand that there are different different learning needs for every child. And similarly, when these children are sitting in a classroom, we need to cater to different needs of children. So, for catering different needs of children with different kinds of TLMs and resources, we would need activities also which are catering to these needs. And worksheets play a very important role in it. So I'll just share a very short experience of mine. So when we started Azim Premji School in Badmer, there were some of the new children who were coming to the school. So we had initially first to third grades in the school, and second and third grade children were already been in through a school system before, but the first grade children were new to the school. And as we know, when new children come to a school, some of them would cry, some of them would not want to sit in the classroom. And when you want them to be part of the classroom, you would do everything. You would talk with them, and you would play with them. So when we provided those children some kind of, when we included them in the discussions in the classroom, and gave them specific materials like coloring worksheets and some TLMs according to their age and level. So children were very much interested in the classroom, and they started taking part in the classroom processes. And in 1 or 2 months, those children were they would not want to leave the school, so they would want to be in the school, and they were very happy to be in the school. And when we progressed in the academic session, so with behavioral changes, we also saw that children who were not at a grade appropriate levels, when we provided them materials according to their level, and worksheets were one of them, they showed great amount of interest of working in the classroom, because they were included in the classroom process, and something was there of their level in the classroom. So yeah, thanks.
Yes, Richa. Uh,
Adding on to what Pooja has mentioned, so in mathematics, worksheets play a very important role for our classes. One is to simply to generate that curiosity about what we are going to learn. So when we had to introduce odd and even numbers to our grade 1 and 2 students, what we simply asked them to do is just to observe whatever is there in their house. At that time we were having online classes, so they had to observe how many spoons are there in their kitchen, how many cups or plates are there in the kitchen, and then they had to record those observations. Later on they had to make pairs and then find out whether that number is odd or even. That was one way in which we used worksheets to generate curiosity or to just develop that interest. Another was for higher grades, because we follow the path of concrete, pictorial, and abstract. So any of our lesson begins with a concrete object to the extent possible. We start with concrete, and to move to pictorial stage, worksheets help us a lot. So for example, when we had to introduce percentage as a concept, we started with discussing where do they see percentage in life, and we got very interesting examples starting from discount in sales to share markets. So these kind of examples student provide us grade 6 learners. Then on, we used jodo gyan material along with virtual simulations to provide them certain experience of the concept, after which worksheets were introduced to help them pictorially understand what the concept is. So in that way also worksheets helped us retain the curiosity.
Hi, it's interesting. Vaishnavi?
Yeah, so I think that just like books, like I don't think worksheets naturally, draw the attention of children. But when children engage with a worksheet that is interesting to them, that is well thought out, and with sufficient support from the teacher, I've seen these small moments of joy that children experience when they arrive at an answer themselves, and they realize that whatever they already know can be applied to make meaning. So this,
Right.
and I feel like if worksheets give scope for something like this to happen in a class, then I think probably that is what would excite a child to to engage with worksheets. To give like a small example, um, I work with in English language, so I think we were trying to develop a worksheet for letter recognition, and and as part of that, we just included a very small activity in which we gave a list of small letters, for example, J, M, N, etc. And we asked children to identify the capital forms of the same letters. And in addition to that, we added an activity in which children had to make use of these capital forms of letters to to draw an object. Like it could be anything, it could be an umbrella, it could be a cat, it could be anything. So not only are they recalling something that they've learned in class, but they're also applying it to create something new. So things like this, I felt, excite children to engage with worksheets. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing three of you say is that keeping the diversity of the learners in mind, keeping their age specific or their understanding of concepts, they're connecting with their immediate environment, uh, and moving from concrete to abstract. engaging with the worksheets and supporting, as teachers supporting them. These are the things which, retain the interest of the students, or develop an interest for students in worksheets. Yeah. So, Pooja, my next question would be specifically to you. Uh, so, um, so you've said in your article that worksheets are a very good learning resource, and you specifically use them for level one children. So, could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, that in a classroom there are children of multiple levels, and in my classroom, I majorly identify children falling in three groups: level one, two, and three. Level one being below grade level, level three being grade appropriate or somewhere near grade appropriate level. So, when I started teaching in the beginning, what I used to do is that I used to teach everybody in a same way. So for example, uh, if I'm teaching, if I'm taking a rhyme, working on a rhyme, so what I would do is I would talk on, like we would have conversation in the classroom about the rhyme, or a story, or some specific chapter. And when we are having a discussion, I would involve children, every all level children would get involved in the discussion. But the discussion used to become chaotic very soon, because how much can you engage children just by conversation? So you would have to take this conversation further to the next level, doing, giving some written work on the same conversation, or making some TLMs or print material on the conversation, and engage children with that specific material. So, but I used to struggle a lot, because other than the conversation part, I was struggling to engage the level one and some level two children in reading and writing tasks, because they were not their level appropriate. They were a bit on the higher side, higher level of their existing level. So I understood my mistake. I talked with a few of my co-teachers, and then I started preparing proper plans, lesson plans, and I documented my lesson plan. And in that specific plan, I mapped the specific chapter and what kind of resources I would be needing. And in that mapping, worksheets were major part of it. So for level one children specifically, uh, I used to design 7 to 8 worksheets from that specific chapter or theme. So I used to design 3 levels of worksheets for level 1, 2, and 3. But for level 1 children, I used to design worksheets on alphabet. So in that they would have to trace the alphabet or some shape, because some of the children were not, they didn't have proper hand balance. So they would trace, they would match, the alphabet or the picture with its word, and complete their names. They would color. I used to keep a lot of coloring worksheets, because level 1 children's attention span was not, it even not specifically level 1 children, but all children's attention span is not that great. For 15 to 20 minutes they would work on one thing, and then they would need something else. So I used to give different kinds of worksheets which are specifically for those children, so they would not feel left out in a class. So their friends who are in level 2 and level 3, they are working on something, and my level 1 children used to work on something else also. So what I used to also do is that I wouldn't want to make these differences in my classroom, where the children know, children pick very easily that they are in different level, and that's why they are getting different kind of a work.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Yes.
I used to keep some common worksheets. So my level 3 child would also do some of the level 1 worksheets, and level 1 child would also get some of the grade appropriate content worksheet. So I used to help out those children, or level 3 children used to help out those children. So what I at last I would like to say that uh, with time, children's their hand balance improved, Their understanding of the concept and theme improved with conversation and discussions with their friends and with me. So with time, I got to see that children were not only taking initiative in doing their worksheets by themselves, but they would also do similar kind of work in their notebooks also, which showed
Right.
me that it proved to be a savior for me and for my children who were not at a grade level. Yeah.
All right. So, since we're speaking about language worksheets, I would like to ask Vaishnavi, uh, one specific thing which I noticed in your article was you said this that the limitations of using worksheets in the classrooms have little to do with the worksheets themselves, but more to do with how they are used. So it would be good if we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think most of us would agree that worksheets are a useful medium to recall and to practice and so on. And at the same time, this is also because a worksheet is essentially it is a piece of paper in which we can print any material, and this is handed out, right? So what makes a worksheet effective or not would depend on how much thought is put into the worksheet while it is created, and what the teacher thinks of how this is going to help the child who's going to be using it eventually. And one challenge that I faced mainly with English teaching is that most of the worksheets they are often used in isolation. Like these worksheets
Mm,
are isolated from the language and the vocabulary which the child brings to the classroom, or they are isolated from from all the other things that's happening in the school, like the other conversations and everything that's happening in the child's day-to-day school life. So I think worksheets can accommodate these aspects as well, and it is that which would make it more effective. So if I were to cite a very small example, which we tried out in primary grades, is that most of the times, especially in classes 1 and 2, the themes which which recur across the curriculum are often the themes which are related to the child's day-to-day life experiences. Like these are themes like my body, my family, my neighborhood, and the things around me, etc. So uh, what we tried doing was we tried to include these aspects while we created a worksheet for English. So uh, just like in the previous example that I mentioned, it was only a very small aspect or a very small exercise as part of the whole worksheet. So what we did was we asked children um, to um, to mention their name, like to write their name. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that this was a worksheet for letter recognition and vocabulary for classes 2 and 3. So we asked children to write their names, to circle the first letter of their name, and to circle the first letter of their name, and also the letter sound. And along with this, we asked them to write another name. This could be a name of their family member or a friend or
mm,
a food they eat, so that they get a chance to also find another name which is matching their own name sound. This might look like a very bare minimum activity to include in a worksheet, but how this helped me, or how this what this made me realize, is that children started thinking of their own names in a in a very different way after this. Like they started to realize that it's not just bat and ball that starts with the letter B and the sound B,
mm,
but it's also their own name, like Bindu, or the food they eat,
mm,
like Bisibelebath, also starts with the same letter. And as far as English language learning or language learning is concerned, this kind of an awareness, it really does go a long way in in how they internalize this concept. So yeah, so basically this is what I meant when I said that worksheets are
okay.
there's nothing wrong with worksheets, but how we use it would definitely make a difference. Yeah.
Right, right. Thank you, Vaishnavi. Uh, I have to say this about Pooja's article that, I was so interested when I saw that she has spoken about differentiated instruction. And I say this because a few years back I had an opportunity to read about DI, as it is called, and Dr. Carol Tomlinson, who is one of the first people to have spoken about DI. And so one thing that Richa says in her article is that um worksheets, one of the biggest advantages of worksheets are that they allow for differentiated instruction, right? So Richa, that's one thing I really want you to speak to us about. But I would think that if you could just in a few, maybe for a minute or so, you can tell our audience about uh, what differentiated instruction is, and then speak about your experiences.
Sure, Chandrika ma'am. So,
Yeah.
before I continue with differentiated instructions, let me just give you a brief context of the children that I work with. So, in my school, children come from upper middle class background, but they are still diverse in terms of their readiness to learn. So I have students in grade 6 who struggle with times tables. Similarly, I have students in grade 3, 4, even 5 who are not very comfortable with mental addition, mental arithmetic. So this is the diversity that I have experienced in my cohort. Now, coming to differentiated instructions, I'll take a simple example to explain this. So, when a newborn baby is there in our house, we do not feed the child, cook solid food initially. We start with milk, then we move on to semi-solid and then solid food, depending on the readiness. Like when the child is ready to chew, then only you will provide with the solid food. In the same way, when you are planning a lesson for a class, you have to look at the individual child's readiness. We all, being teachers, we all understand that prerequisites we check, but generally we check prerequisites at a classroom level. I feel that it is even more important to look at the individuals also, because within in a classroom you will have diversity in this way also. So when I say differentiated instructions, it simply means that preparing your lessons or designing your lessons keeping in mind the readiness of each of your learners, not just readiness and learning style as well. So this is what differentiated instruction simply mean, and you can differentiate in four different ways. I will explain those four ways using examples of my own classrooms. So in that way I would address this concept of differentiation. So the first way in which you can differentiate your instructions is through the content itself. Like what are you teaching, how are you breaking down the learning objectives while addressing a particular concept. So take for example place value. Now place value as a concept is a pretty broad and deep concept. You have to begin with understanding the place value of each digit in a number. Suppose a 3-digit number is there, say 756. So 5 comes in the tens place with value 50. This is one level of understanding in place value. The last stage can be you are given 3-digit numbers and you are given 3 digits and you have to create a 3-digit number with a condition. Say for example,
Yeah.
again 7, 5, and 6. You have to create a 3-digit number which is greater than 750 and less than 800, or between 600 and 700. Now this is the
Right.
highest challenge that one can think of. So because
Sure.
in my class I had learners who, some of them struggled with the basics also, with the writing the numbers properly in the correct order by arranging the digits, and then there were others who had mastered this already. To engage all of them meaningfully, I had to use levels of worksheets in the class. Now building upon what Pooja mentioned about protecting children and their self esteem while differentiating, so we used to use the resources from Twinkle. It's a website that you can access. I have mentioned it in the article also. Now they
Yes.
design worksheets and they do not mention on them, lower ability, middle or
Hmm.
higher ability. They use
That's true.
stars, single star, double star, triple star. That indicates the level of the worksheet. So teacher can easily differentiate. Children also understand, ki, okay, once I am done with level 1, I'll move to level 2, then I'll go to level 3. So each one of them eventually reaching the outcome or the objective, but at their own pace. So that is how we differentiate when it comes to content. The other thing is processes. Now processes means what kind of resources I am using, how am I providing the learning experience in the class. So again, take for example area. If I want to discuss area of a shape, say rectangle or a square, now we used graph paper, the simple resource, to provide children with an experience to find out area of a given shape. They had to count the squares inside the given shape to find out what is the area. Now, eventually, students move to a level wherein they start using formulae. But if a child is not able to do that at particular time, you can still provide them that particular resource. So till the time your student is not ready for the next stage, you can keep giving them the resources. So in this way, you can vary the process itself. Then you have outcome. Now this is very interesting. Generally we have your standardized assessments for assessing the learning of a particular child. But if you could innovate in terms of outcomes also, say for example in my class for ratio and proportion, I asked students to record a video of cooking. They had to cook a particular food item, sandwich, upma, or whatever, and they had to explain what ratio of ingredients have they used for making serving for one person, and how much would they change when it comes to more people. So now this is not a worksheet, but same way you can design worksheet depending on the need of the learner, wherein you can use more visual content. You can go for that depending on whether your students are ready or not. Finally, the learning environment that you can modify again based on your objectives and based on your learners. You can go for independent tasks, you can go for group tasks, you can go for pair tasks also. How you are grouping your learners, whether you are focusing on mixed ability groups or you are focusing on, same ability students grouped together. This also helps in making sure that students meet the learning objectives. At the same time, they are able to enjoy the learning process. So, to explain this last bit, I'll take an example of a challenge that I had given to all my learners. So, what they had to do is, a hypothetical farmer needed a field. He wanted a field. Now, the farmer wanted field either in the shape of a square or a rectangle. This was the condition. Area was given to the to the students. The cost of fencing that field was given to the students, but the dimensions were not. The challenge for them was that they had to tell what will be the cheapest field design. So now to do this, they all have to master the concept. But because it was a challenging question, I made sure that the groups were formed in a way that they were mixed ability groups, so that no child feels like I cannot do it. This allowed me to meet my objective without leaving any child behind. So this was how I tried to incorporate the worksheets along with the differentiation bit. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you've really, put all the four parts of DI together and presented what you did in your classrooms. So I'm just going to come back to Pooja, and just wanted to know from her, when according to you, when do you think, I mean, how does a teacher decide when to use a worksheet as a learning material? How does a teacher decide?
Uh, I think this question can have multiple answers. I If I look at myself as a teacher, and I have worked with a lot of teachers, and I have seen processes of Azim Primji School, Badmer, and them using worksheets with children, specifically in pandemic time. I think, according to me, it really depends. It depends on a few things, like what kind of a concept I'm going to be introducing to my class. It depends on the complexity of the concept. What is the level of my children? It depends on that. And I think for a lot of teachers, it depends on the availability of resources. Budget comes in between, and where to get the prints, and from where you get the worksheets, how do you make worksheets according to your class. But I think the complexity of a concept and children's need would be my top priority. uh, and what do I actually want to achieve from this lesson? So as Richa was mentioning, the objectives of introducing a concept, and if I would need worksheet as a resource in this chapter or not. Because if the concept is not that complex, I might just use supplementary TLMs, and engage children in groups. If my TLMs would need supplementary worksheets with it, so how Vaishnavi mentioned in her article that introducing worksheets in isolation would not work. You would have to
Right.
work along with the worksheets, like work on the worksheets with children, and introduce some other TLMs which would support the kind of activities that you have given, exercises that you have given in your worksheet. So uh, when children see, when I say it depends on the level, so there would be some children in the classroom whose attention you would want to grab, those children's attention specifically in some of the concepts, and they are
Right.
not able to work, they are not able to gauge the concept in a class of 35 students. So for those specific students, I might, as a teacher, I would want to bring in some worksheets in the class. So for me, if I see, I would provide some common worksheets to my class, in which every child of my class would be able to engage in some common tasks like coloring, oral expression on a picture. In a worksheet, you see a picture and you either write on it or you present the story orally, and then some level specific worksheets. So for me, the complexity of the concept and children's level, plus if I want my children to self learn in some specific theme or concept, I would want them to interrogate something, or I would want them to analyze something, bring in information from their surrounding, and note it down in some kind of a specific table or some specific form. Then I would bring in some worksheets in my classroom. So yeah, for me as a teacher, I think it varies a lot, it depends a lot on the situation, concept, and availability of the resources. Yeah.
All right. So, Vaishnavi, I was just, also intrigued by one particular aspect of what you said, that you used activities along with worksheets. Like you provided some activities and then followed it up by worksheets, if I've understood that right. So,
Yes.
can you speak a little bit about that?
Um, so, what I think is that I'm of the opinion that language learning cannot happen without exposing children to, without giving them access to meaningful language experiences. And I think worksheets are not sufficient for that. And what I mean by meaningful language experiences is simply like listening to, or allowing children to be part of natural conversations in English, or storytelling which comes with a context, and exposing them to pictures, videos, things like that, which have meaning for the child. And I think that this is all the more true for when we talk about English, because it is a language in which children have very limited or no exposure to at all, oral exposure to at all. So in these cases, like worksheets become a tool. Worksheets are a tool which are essentially in print. So if we start off with worksheets, then it can be, I think it can be a little alienating for the child, because it might just look like a bunch of symbols that's printed on a piece of paper that they have to work with. So in such situations, it would make more sense to start off with oral activities and then slowly transition to worksheets, is what I felt. and my yeah, and in my article also I've explained that in detail. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And yeah, so I tried this intervention with class 2 and 3, where we started off with activities that are mainly oral in nature. So this includes things like storytelling, and something like the phonics game. We call it the sound game, where where we choose a bunch of words which have similar sounding which have similar sounds, like for example coffee, cake, words like that. And we ask children to close their eyes and listen to these words, patiently. And then we follow it up with questions. We follow it up with questions like, so did you hear the sound k anywhere? How many times did you hear the sound k in the word cake? So yeah, so this is an example of an oral game or a language game that we started off with, and slowly we transitioned to print, where we use flashcards and picture books, where children are expected to identify a particular vocabulary item, but we don't directly ask them to write or read anything. They just ask to identify and recognize. And slowly, I also
Right.
use, yeah.
So, Prema, am I audible?
Yes, you are, Chandrika.
Okay, I'm not able to hear you all, but Prema, are there any questions from the audience which we would like to take?
Are you able to hear me, Chandrika?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
So I was asking Prema, if there are any questions? Oh, there are no questions. Okay. So, a couple of questions that I still had in mind, which I would like to ask the three of you, and you could take turns in answering, or you could choose who would like to answer. Is this like based on your experiences of using the worksheet, based on your experiences as teachers, what would you choose? Would you choose a worksheet as a learning tool, or would you rather choose a worksheet as an uh, assessment tool? Prima, was my question clear?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. And Vaishnavi, you had completed, right, what you were saying?
Uh, no, I was actually still
All
finishing.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, so would you
There's
like to
also one
finish?
more. Yeah, but there's also one more which could be answered if you have the time.
Uh,
Uh,
sure. So Vaishnavi, why don't you finish what you were
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Because my connection broke in between,
yeah,
so I
that's
thought you
okay.
had finished. Yeah, so sorry about that.
No, no, that's okay. No, basically, I was just trying to bring in the point that why I would use worksheets towards the end uh,
Hmm.
would be to give sufficient oral exposure, and also to give children a chance to play with play with shapes and to construct shapes on their own, and then slowly transition to writing. Yeah. So basically, it was just that. It's okay. We can
Yeah,
continue.
so so something which what Pooja also spoke about, that she would decide where she wants to use it, which is something that any material, which is a characteristic of any material. So if I as a practitioner want to use a material to introduce a concept, or as a mid class activity, or to close a concept, to bring in closure to some discussion that has been happening. So I think it is, one could say it's a very generic quality of a learning material, where a teacher, based on her understanding, based on what she would like to bring to the table, she would decide as to where to use it. So I heard different things, but then it kind of sounded very similar, because it's the autonomy of the teacher where she or he wants to use the to use the material. Uh, so, Prema, can I go ahead with the question?
One question you might want to answer. It's directed
Right.
at Pooja and it's from Satvika. What are some of the alternate TLMs you would use instead of worksheets, Pooja?
Yeah. Uh, Thanks for the question, Satvika. It's a very interesting question. So I jotted down some of the TLMs which I used alongside the worksheets, but not specifically with the worksheets. So, so first, the very basic TLM which teachers use is charts. So preparing different kinds of charts, ranging from rhyme charts to writing words from different letters. So I'll give you an example. So what I did, I just pasted a an empty chart on the wall, and I divided it into some sections, 8 to 10 sections, and I told my children that I would write one letter in one section every day, and I expect you all to write anything that comes in your mind from that specific letter. Words that start with the letter, words that end with the letter. So you have to do that. And in initial days I used to write, so for the 2 3 days I wrote a specific letter, and children used to find words from their textbooks, words that they know of, their own names. And I saw that even my children who were not grade level, they used to write their own name when their letter came on the chart. So this is one of a thing. And then we also made alphabet books in our class, and children wrote their own books in the class. So as Vaishnavi was mentioning, flashcards and storybooks. So children's literature is the best TLM a teacher can use if they don't have access to a lot of a variety of TLMs. So different kinds of flashcards I used to use in my classroom. Some game boards, starting from different words, starting from letters. So we can make any kind of game boards depending on what kind of a concept we are taking in the classroom. And I also did that for my level 1 children. I had some cutouts of letters. So I printed or I drew a star, and I cut it in a symmetrical shape, and then I wrote a capital A on one side and small a on the other part. And what children used to do, they used to find what is the other equivalent part of the shape. And with time they used to see that, oh, if capital B is written here, I have to find small b. So
Right.
these are some kind of TLMs which I have in mind. I'm sure other people can also write in the chat what kind of TLMs we can use without other than worksheets. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We do have some other questions also.
Yes. Yeah. So Srini wants to ask, is there any difference between worksheets and learning sheets? That is Srini's question. And this is followed up by Nitu's question, especially to improve logical reasoning and reading. So that is two parts of the same question by two different people.
So I'd like to take this question. So, firstly, talking about worksheets and learning sheets, I will not be citing any theory to tell this difference. Based on what I understand from the differences, when I was a child, I used to be given worksheets, but those worksheets were primarily practice based. So if you have learned, for example, double digit multiplication, you'd be given 10 questions and you are simply solving those questions. On the contrary, when your worksheets allow you or actually require you to explore your surroundings or even explore the material that you have with yourself, and you are supposed to record your observations in your worksheets to make meaning of particular concept for yourself, it becomes a learning sheet. So to give you an example, when I am working around prisms and pyramids, so we use Jodogyan material, Jodogyan straws. These straws help children make shapes on their own. So once they are making those shapes, they have to record how many vertices are there, how many sides, depending on if it's a 2D shape or a 3D shape, the different elements of shapes they have to note down. Since they are recording their observations, it becomes a learning sheet because it's allowing them to learn a particular concept on their own with their own experience. So I think I have addressed both the questions, as in the difference as well as the TLM source for us. For mathematics, for logical reasoning, we primarily rely on Jodogyan material. It's a really, really good material, whether it comes to integers or it comes to fractions. They have pretty like hands-on material that can be used easily by students. They have kits for times tables also. So my students challenge each other by playing with those playing cards of times tables. So it's a GeoGebra, yes, as ma'am said, GeoGebra is also a very good virtual tool, which we use for multiple concepts. We have tried learning coordinates through that. Then we have virtual tools also, CK12. I mean, there are multiple websites or links in my article. CK12 is also used by us for virtual simulations. But for hands-on, real concrete material, I think Jorogan would be my personal favorite. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so are there any more questions, Prema?
Yes, there are. Yes, there are. Let me read out one. One is from Rameshwar Khairnar, who says,
Not able to
what are
hear,
some of,
Prema.
can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, Prema. Yes,
Yeah.
Prema. It's a very good question. Just come up.
Rameshwar Khairnar is saying, what are some of the challenges you faced when working with worksheets, and how do you overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think I'll take it up.
Sure.
So one of the challenges that I faced, especially working in government schools, is that for a government school teacher to there's a huge resource crunch that we face in government schools when it comes to printing of worksheets, and especially when we talk about a class size which is like really big of like 50 students, to to constantly get worksheets printed and to work with them can be one of the practical challenges of creating or designing worksheets. And another problem or challenge that we face is that worksheets have become so prevalent now. Like after the lockdown, it's become like a go-to medium. So, and most of the classroom experience of a child is, as we know, is centered around the blackboard. Like children usually need something to copy from, and this practice of having something to copy out of is also a big problem that also seeps into our practice of worksheets, because if teachers or if we who work with children do not provide enough support for children, then naturally they would, the tendency would be to copy from a peer, or the inattentiveness would also increase along with it. So to work around this can be very difficult. I think one simple way we can work around this is to encourage children to make mistakes, and to assure them and emphasize that the mistakes they make is also like is valuable for their own learning process, and that it is, whatever they write has value. So yeah, I think that's one challenge that I have faced. Yeah.
Anyone else would like to add to this? Pooja,
Uh,
Richa?
yeah. So at times it also happens that we are not able to get proper kind of images which we want to put in the worksheet. It's
Yeah.
basically a challenge of designing the worksheet. So and also sometimes we don't while using some kinds of images and some kinds of font, we don't really see if it is easy for the child or difficult for the child to understand. So Comic Sans is the font which we usually use in children's worksheet. It's amazing. Even adults love that font. I usually write a lot of my own documents in it. And if we want to use simple fonts, then you go to the Google and you write clip black and white clip art of. So black and white clip art of cat box. So you'll find blank images of things which you can put in the worksheet, and children can color the worksheet by the by themselves. So this is one of the challenge teachers feel, that they are not able to get blank images or proper images for children. Also, one of the challenges that I felt while working with worksheets with children is that at times children copy from each other. So it's very hard to assess if the child has done the work by himself. Like when we are working with a group of children, others would, copy. These kind of challenges come. And then one more challenge which I felt was that um, when we provide the worksheet to children, children don't take the hardship of reading the questions. Even the questions are very simple, they would want us to read every question to them and then they would solve. So it takes a lot of time to get children to that level that you read the question yourself, you understand it, and then you write it. So it takes a lot of practice with the children, and with time it comes naturally to them. Yeah.
There is one question from Sumit Pandey, which have you got time only for one more, I think. He says, can I deliver more than one concept in the same worksheet? And what should be the length of a worksheet? Can I deliver more than one concept? And what should be the ideal length of a worksheet? This is from Sumit Pandey.
I think we have tried to focus on a particular concept whenever we have used a worksheet. So they have been very, very focused. We have tried to meet multiple learning objectives, but the concepts were not really multiple concepts. Yes, in case wherever there was logical connection between two concepts, you would find them. Otherwise, mostly worksheets were very, very focused to a particular concept. About the length, I think it depends what kind of a worksheet it is. So if it has to be an in-class worksheet, we have to also keep in mind the duration that we have of a particular class session. But yes, then there are assignments wherein we play with the time, because that has to be done at home on their pace. At that time we try to take the liberty, but otherwise I think two-pager worksheet, again, now it depends on the font size and all the other things. Trying to meet the learning objectives, I think, becomes our goal, our priority.
Uh, Chandrika, would you like to ask any more questions of any of them? I think we have only about 3 minutes left,
Yeah,
2 minutes in
just
fact.
2 minutes left. I was just wondering, I was wanting to ask about challenges, but that came up as an audience question, so which was good. I was just wondering as to, since you have worked with worksheets during this pandemic, this challenging pandemic time, you have interacted with the students, you might have interacted with the parents. So, how how do you think parents and students can be, guided to meaningfully use worksheets? What is it that what are the few things that you think we need to tell the parents and tell the students about the usage of worksheets? This should be my last question, Prem.
Who is going to answer it?
Yeah, anyone could take this question. Just one response also would
Yeah.
suffice, given that we have time.
Yeah, Richa, go ahead.
I almost muted myself because he was speaking. Okay,
All right.
so basically, I think two things I would want to make very clear before I hand over a worksheet. One is the purpose, because if they know the purpose is learning, I would hope that they would not copy. That's one challenge that I also face, because the objective becomes, okay, correction has to happen, so copy the answers. So that is one thing I want to make clear whenever I hand over. The other is process. So we try to keep the instructions very clear. This is how we have to go about it. So those instructions they have to be very clear. Generally, we give worksheets to the students, so the instructions also go to the students. Parents' involvement whenever needed, we try to keep an end note related to that. Otherwise, mostly the instructions are made clear to the students only.
All right. All right. Yeah. Okay. Prema, I think we should take that question. Which one more question, if we could take from the audience, will that, and then probably end the discussion with that.
Actually, Neetu Sachdev wants to have kindly recommend any meaningful websites that can be used to improve the skill sets at primary level. Anyone
I
who
think
wants that?
Richa has already mentioned
Already kind
GeoGebra.
of,
She's mentioned, yeah, it has been mentioned.
yeah.
So, yeah. So, Pooja, would you like to take that question which we are talking about?
Yeah, yeah. ज्योति हैड आस्क्ड किसी वर्कशीट को करने में हमें बच्चों को कितनी सहायता देना चाहिए? क्या ये बच्चे पर डिपेंड करता है या हम वर्कशीट से क्या करवाना चाहते हैं उस पर? So this means that what kind of support or to what extent should we provide support to children while we are working on worksheet? Does it depend on the child or the kind of work or the objective of using the worksheet from our side? So on he's asking how on what does it depend. So I think that it depends on both. It depends when we are introducing the worksheet and why. So I'll just give one example. If I'm using the worksheet for in while I am introducing a concept, so I've introduced a concept in the class, I've talked about it, the chapter, and what does the chapter talk about, and then we have jumped into the exercises, and I have provided some worksheet to help my children practice those understood concepts. So when my children are facing some issues, difficulties, which they will, level 1 children, 2, 3, all of them would face difficulties. So that time I would help them definitely. I would help them. I would ask their friends to help them. They would go and ask their friends for help. And then when I'm using worksheet to assess a final understanding on that specific concept of that child, then I would not help that child. I would ask the child to do it by themselves. So it depends on both. What is the level of the child? What I want to do with the worksheet, whether I'm giving the worksheet for practice of a specific concept that is being introduced in the class, or I'm using it at the end of the concept that has been taught. So to assess, so formative assessment, as you say, between while introducing, in between, and at the end. So it's a cycle, and you will see your medium of instruction, the way of observation, everything changes as the cycle progresses. Yeah, I hope I have answered it. Thanks.
Yes, very
Uh,
well. We've now come to the end of the show. It's a little over 1 hour, and I think regretfully we have to stop. You can always direct your questions to the Azim Premji Foundation website and have all your questions answered, which we were unable to do at this time. And it's been wonderful listening to the three of you, Pooja, Vaishnavi, and Richa. And we've learned a lot, and actually, very, very impressive the way you use worksheets and the aims behind the worksheets and the goal of the worksheets. And Chandrika has brought out all that beautifully. So I want to thank all of you for sparing the time and making this such a success. So please join us again on the 6th of July when the next webinar will be held. And thank you once again. And hope we can keep up this engagement later on as well. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.